Milford-on-Sea is a large village in Hampshire with a population of 4,660 at the 2011 census. Milford began life in Saxon times. Over time it was split into separate estates and wasn't united until 1829 when Mary Whitby purchased Milford Baddesley. Milford has a strong tourism economy with many hotels, restaurants and cafes. Milford is a beautiful coastal gem that has a wonderful and intriguing history. Here we are going to look at its prominent architecture and citizens to give a generalised historic view of this lovely place. Hurst Castle was built between 1541 and 1544 by Henry VIII as part of a chain of artillery fortresses protecting key ports and landing places around southern England. The castle guarded the Needles Passage leading to the Solent, the port of Southampton and the growing naval base at Portsmouth. The castle was also used as a prison, most famously when Charles I was held captive here in 1648. Modernised in the 19th century, it has been a key fortress which, amazingly, remained in military use right up until 1956 and played an active role through both world wars. The land where the castle was built was uninhabited before construction began in 1541. Hurst Castle formed part of a chain of fortresses which stretched from Hull in the northeast all the way to Milford Haven in Pembrokeshire. After it was completed in 1544, the castle was armed with about 20 guns. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the castle remained unchanged right up until the French Revolution in 1793. Postings at Hurst could prove to be quite lengthy. One master gunner served for 37 years from 1625. Another served 17 years in 1800. A small community, including an inn, grew up just outside the castle during this time to serve the garrison. A number of soldiers and their families lodged in houses there. The area around the spit was famous for smuggling. Often members of the garrison were involved. In 1680 a customs post was located here and a century later a lighthouse was built. During the Civil War the castle was held for Parliament but was never attacked. In 1700 Hurst was used as a secure prison for people of the Roman Catholic faith. Father Paul Atkinson was held for 30 years right up until his death. During the Napoleonic War in 1803 the castle was transformed. Much was added to fortify the castle, but it never saw any action. In the mid-1800s the castle was further modified. Further armaments were added during the World Wars. Conservation started in 1933 and in 1956 the castle came into the care of the Ministry of Works, which then became English Heritage. The original lighthouse was the tower which first saw light in 1786. In 1812 a second lighthouse was built. In 1865 and 1873 firstly a low-level lighthouse was built and then a 26-metre tower was constructed. Updated through the years, the towers provided safety to passing ships. By 1911 shifting sandbanks meant the need for a new tower mounted along the castle wall. In 1923 both towers became automated. In 1997 electric power was provided with further updates for the main tower, but the smaller low-level tower was decommissioned due to lack of need for it. The White House was built by Mr. and Mrs. Walker Munro. The money to build came from the Walker side of the family, who made it rich through coal. Many buildings stood on the land dated back to the times of William the Conqueror, until Rhinefield House came into being. After much of the Crown lands were privatised, Rhinefield passed to the Walker family. In 1885 the only daughter of the Walker family became engaged to Lieutenant Munro of the Royal Navy. Her father's present was £250,000, which would be worth over £30 million today, with instructions to build a family home at Rhinefield. The original house at Rhinefield was pulled down. The couple were married in 1887 and adopted the Walker Munro name, and began construction on their new home. It would consist of a great house, a hunting lodge, stables, gardener's bothy and a gate lodge. With the leftover cash, 6 acres of land was purchased, and in 1903 they built a modest seaside summer residence. Described as a modest beach hut, it had a nautical theme, being in the shape of the bridge of an ocean liner. It also has a galleon weather vane, ship's bridge, a room at the top for stunning views, porthole windows, and a lighthouse turret housing a staircase. The Walker Munros only stayed for 1 month each year, with 45 servants. Lieutenant Commander Walker Munro died in 1923 and his wife in 1934. The estate passed to their son, who sold the property and moved to Kenya in 1938. The purchasers were Middlesex County Council, who used it for female tuberculosis patients. In World War II, the house was requisitioned for the military. In 1948, the NHS took it over for male TB sufferers. 3 years later, it was used to treat child TB sufferers. In 1963, it became a special needs school before falling into disuse by 1983. Squatters and drug addicts moved in and wrecked it. In 1993, there were reports of demolition. The site was eventually bought by developers in 1997, and the house converted into 14 apartments in the old house, with 2 lodges and 2 separate bungalows on the seafront. There have been many famous people to live in Milford-on-Sea. In fact, there have been 3 admirals. But the one I am going to talk about is the most famous resident in New Milton's history, Admiral William Cornwallis. He was born in 1744. Cornwallis joined the Navy in 1755. His first ship was the Newark, on which he saw action at the capture of Louisbourg in 1758 and the Battle of Quiberon Bay in 1759. He was appointed lieutenant in April 1761. In 1764 he was promoted to commander and was made a captain in April 1765. In 1774 he was stationed around the west coast of Africa before being stationed to the West Indies, where he took part in the Battle of Grenada on the 6th of July 1779. He met Nelson in Jamaica. He saw further action during the American War at St Kitts in 1788 and also at the Battle of the Saints in the same year. He was made Commodore and Commander-in-Chief of the West Indies in October 1788. In 1793 he was promoted Rear Admiral and moved to the Channel Fleet. The same year he was made Vice Admiral and moved to the 100-gun Royal Sovereign. He took command of the West Indies Fleet in 1796. After his ship was damaged in a collision, he returned to Spithead. He survived a court-martial after refusing to join the fleet, but he was in very bad health at the time. He became a full admiral in 1799. In 1801 he returned to active service as commander of the Channel Fleet aboard the 110-gun Ville de Paris. He masterminded the blockade of the French fleet, stopping the invasion. He was exhausted by his exertions of command and hauled down his flag on the 22nd of February 1806 and saw no further service. Cornwallis never married. In 1800 he purchased the Newlands estate in Milford-on-Sea. He was joined by his friend Captain John Whitby and his wife and daughter. John Whitby died in 1806, but his wife and daughter stayed on and looked after Cornwallis until his death in 1819. This is what it looks like today. Milford-on-Sea has seen many hotels over the years, but one of its most famous is the Camden Hurst Hotel, which served paying customers for many years before being transformed into apartments. This is the building as we see it today. There are many wonderful locations around Milford-on-Sea, but at its heart is Milford Green and the shops that surround it. The land where the Biscuit House now sits was originally leased in 1677. There were several owners in the 17 and 1800s until 1884, when it was developed into a dwelling house with a sitting room, 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a scullery, outbuildings, a 4-walled stable, coach house for 4 vehicles, a shed, a walled-in garden and a slaughterhouse. In 1899, George Miles bought it and it remained a butcher's for 46 years until 1945, when it was sold. A young man, Fred Cook, bought G. Miles Butchers and also Hillier's Butchers after being demobbed from the Navy in 1947. When Fred retired, he sold Hillier's and converted the slaughterhouse at number 64 into a granny flat. After his daughter Gwen married in Canada in 1957, she returned to Milford in 1961 and lived at number 64 and converted it into Gwen's Boutique. She carried on trading until December 2012. The shop was then sold in 2016 and is now called the Biscuit House. The earliest record of number 46 is from 1676, when the lease was sold for £15. By 1874, the Cole family owned the land. It was passed through the family until 1908, when it was sold to a bootmaker. The new owner, Edward Knight's brother, Cecil Lewis, owned a business next door in 1919. He bought number 46. After the war, the business expanded and a grocery shop was opened. Also, some of the upstairs became a tea room. In summertime, afternoon tea was served from an old cricket pavilion which had been part of the Newlands estate. Cecil married in 1915 and his son joined the business in 1934. Following World War II, the family expanded the confectionery shop to sell toys, gifts and souvenirs. The business continued until 1979. After several different guises, it is now called Polly's Pantry. The earliest record for numbers 29 and 33 date back to a 500-year lease granted in October 1777. Tithe data from 1841 shows the property owned by the Cole family. In June 1905, the property was sold and split into 2 shops. Number 29 was sold to Heppenstall and Clark, and number 33 was sold to Jackman's estate agents. In 1907, Heppenstalls took over number 33. They kept it until 1961. For much of its life, number 33 was either an office or a shop. Documents dated 1909 and 1922 confirm the use of number 33, which adjoins the post office and is occupied as a shop and dwelling house by Mrs. Fanny Christie. The shop was a general store which specialised in china, some of which bared the Milford village crest. Tourists arriving by the new railway birthed the souvenir trade. Porcelain figures with the village crest were made between the late 1800s and 1939. These pieces are still collectible today. As you can see, the shop is now called New Seasons. As a neighbour to number 33, the beginnings are much the same. Owned and sold by the Cole family to Heppenstall and Clark in 1961, Heppenstall sold number 29 and number 31, and for the next 23 years, number 29 passed through several owners before David Palmer and his wife bought the property in 1984. It was converted into a shop called Minuet, selling fashions. Minuet was sold in 2003. Number 29 is now owned by the chiropodist Foot in the Door. Number 10 was originally built around 1680 with a thatched roof. Often in a poor condition and in need of repairs and building following flooding and storms. It operated as a poorhouse until 1835, when the house was sold to Mrs. Mary Anna Teresa Whitby of Newlands Manor and leased to various people and businesses. In the last 200 years, the property has been a draper's shop, a lodging house, a branch of the Wiltshire and Dorset Bank, a tea shop, a cake shop and a restaurant before becoming Baytrees B&B some 18 years ago. It offers 5-star accommodation and beautiful surroundings. The name Baytrees was fashioned in 1959 and is still known as this today. Milford-on-Sea is a beautiful village with some fascinating history. If you have some spare time and fancy a great day out, visit Milford-on-Sea and take in some of its amazing historic locations and beautiful and wonderful scenery. If you've enjoyed this video, like it by hitting that thumbs up button. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button for more great videos. Thanks very much.